I don't think I made a video about this, but last year, the Washington Post ran this story. Going to remove myself for a second here. The revolt of the Christian homeschoolers. It's a really fascinating article in the Washington Post. And it was about this Christian couple with 4 kids, and they were thinking about sending their oldest to a public school. And this violated everything they had ever done in their lives because the couple profiled in that article, Christina and Aaron Beal, they are about as conservative as you would imagine. They were products of Christian homeschooling. They existed in fundamentalist Christian circles. I think the woman went to a fundamentalist Christian college. And so they grew up believing birth control is evil, creationism is true, dinosaurs were on Noah's Ark. And they also thought public schools were indoctrination camps. That was their term. And they were run by the governments to turn children against Jesus Christ. So, like, they assumed that when they had kids, they would homeschool their kids too, right? And what the article made clear is as this couple starts getting older a little bit, because they married young, of course they did, they're fundies. As they get older, they start having some questions about their religious upbringing, right? They began questioning certain aspects of it. They realized, like, homeschooling, this insulated fundamentalist culture, it kind of facilitates sexual abuse for a lot of people. It sheltered them from scientific realities about the world. It espoused archaic gender roles for the couple, and they didn't feel that that stuff was true anymore. And they also happen to live in an area that had some really good public schools. So when they're talking to their neighbors and other people in, like, outside their Christian community, but like people they know, what are these other families doing? They're bragging about the schools. They're talking about how great their kids are doing. And so when this couple's oldest daughter, they have 4 kids, the oldest one was about to enter first grade, they said, maybe we should consider sending her to the public school because everyone keeps raving about it. And that was not an easy decision for them, but they did it. And their daughter, guess what? The daughter loved it. And her teacher loved the daughter. Like, the girl made new friends. She became a better reader. And very quickly, all the concerns this Christian couple had about public schools, all the worries they had, they kind of melted away. And this is a quotation from the article I loved from Aaron Beal, the dad. People who think the public schools are indoctrinating don't know what indoctrination is. We were indoctrinated. And so the article pointed out that any doubts they had about the public schools were usually silenced by their wonder and gratitude at the breadth of their children's education, which is fantastic. And the wife, Christina, she even began volunteering in her daughter's classroom. And so that is amazing. Like, good for that couple, right? They faced their fears head on. They learned public schools are actually decent places. They became part of that community. No one's asking them to abandon their faith. And they realize, oh, and no one's asking our daughter to do that either, because it turns out, like, public school is not just, I don't know, Richard Dawkins coming into your classroom and saying God is of delusion. They're not performing gender operations on kids. I don't know. None of that stuff is happening. So anyway, when I wrote about that story about a year ago and commented on it, I could tell you, as someone who has worked at a public school myself, like any institution, public schools are not perfect. They have flaws. They are not and should not be immune from criticism. But the Christian right has spent decades lying about the extent of those problems to an audience of people predisposed to hating anything connected to the government. Like, they demonize hardworking teachers. They say administrators are out to do horrible things for your kids. Then they try to take over school boards to try to replace expertise with, like, right-wing indoctrination. Just last month, I did a video on this. The failed actor Kirk Cameron, he made a video, or he was on a podcast where he said, if you send your kids to a public school, they will come out as little Marxists, little atheists, drag queens, strippers, drug dealers. Like, who knew? Not me. Didn't realize any of that. And while all of that is going on, homeschooling has its own set of problems, right? Because we've seen religious communities fail time and time again. There's a story I've told before about a homeschooled Christian who told people about how when she was younger, her dad told her to write up her own high school transcript. She had to write it with her own grades so that they could submit something somewhere. Like that shouldn't be how anything works. And there is a powerful lobby called the Homeschool Legal Defense Association that has repeatedly fought against any kind of oversight on Christian parents, which is a move that facilitates abusive behavior, both physical and educational. And it's all that stays out of public view. Because if the state and state officials can't do the bare minimum to make sure your kid's getting an education, you can very easily not educate your kids at all and just say, well, they're being trained in the Bible. That's all that matters. Okay, so there are problems with homeschooling too. There's no way to make sure students are receiving even a rudimentary education if you follow the policy goals of religious right groups. So, with all that in mind, I was really amazed because I saw an article in Christianity Today, the evangelical Christian outlet, and this was the headline: Public school can be a training ground for faith. Like, basically, and keep in mind, this is for a Christian outlet. This writer, who is the theology editor for Christianity Today, Stefani McDade, she was basically saying, hey, Christians, public schools may not be that bad. You might get something out of them, so maybe consider it. And I thought that's a very interesting position for an editor at Christianity Today to take. And what she wrote is that the Christian case for public schooling is worth revisiting. And like, look, it would be very nice in my head. It would be very nice if she called out those lies that the evangelical world has about public schools. It would be nice if she called out the problems with homeschooling your kids. She didn't do any of that. And she didn't offer any of the nuanced criticism I wish she would have done. However, again, speaking to a Christian audience that is probably not eager to hear any of that stuff. But what she said is that Christian parents should send their kids to public schools because they're a really good test of faith. Basically, kids get to experience being in an environment where not everyone shares their beliefs. And if that's the case, they may be asked, oh, why do you believe that stuff? And they're going to have to answer it. They may have to defend their faith from a very young age. And that's why she says she and her husband have a kid who's not old enough to go to school yet. But when she's old enough, she said, we may consider sending her to a public school. And she writes in this article about her own abrupt transition. She moved in the middle of 6th grade from a homeschooling environment in Florida to a public school in the Pacific Northwest. Like, hard to imagine a bigger culture shock. And that would be tough for anybody, certainly in the middle of 6th grade. And she says it was really tough for her because of how seriously she took her religion. She said she was bullied at school because of it. It took her a lot of time to figure out how to stand up for herself. And it would have been a lot easier, she said, if she had always attended public school and was used to all that stuff. All right. So one thing she writes in here, let me show you this from this article. Once I was regularly provoked at school, I had to learn why I believed what I believed. I had to make my faith my own. With my parents' guidance, I began reading apologetics books so I would know how to respond when someone attacked my views. That decision began a trajectory that led to who and where I am today, serving as theology editor at Christianity Today. So, all right, fine. I'm glad you're happy in your career, and I'm glad your career involves your faith. I don't particularly care. Like, that's all well and good. I do have questions about how seriously she was bullied because, look, I sympathize on one level. Bullies suck. Being different sucks. Middle school definitely sucks. Getting picked on by middle school bullies because of who you are and because of your differences. All of that sucks. I get that. And one upside to that is if you can get through all that, you may come out stronger on the other side. But obviously, not everyone makes it through that sort of stuff. At the same time, I personally find it hard to believe that it's that hard to be a Christian anywhere. even in Washington. Like, I would bet good money that young Muslims going to school in a very Christian community have it way worse than a Christian going to like a suburb of Washington state. Not to diminish what she went through. I'm just saying, was it really that bad? I don't know. I didn't hear many specifics. Her anecdotes read like a God's Not Dead script. She even mentioned that there was a teacher who wrote in her yearbook, quote, "Don't be hindered by dogma," which is a very weird thing for a teacher to write to anybody. Totally inappropriate, if true, but very weird. But also, if that's the worst you've got, I don't know. It doesn't sound that bad. But anyway, you get it. It's not hard to see where she's coming from. She was a believer from a young age, going to a public school where not everybody was a Christian, and that helped strengthen her faith. And now she's telling other Christian parents, see, it's not that bad. And it would be a lot easier if you did it from a young age with your kids, right? Plus, she points out, all these kids are going to leave the Christian bubble at some point. Do evangelicals want it to happen in college when you're not around to monitor your kids, or after college when you're definitely not around? Or do you want to do it in elementary school when your kids are still living under your roof? Right? This is what she said about it. One more section here. Think of it like strength training. Your children need to build muscles of faith, and public school can provide weight to lift while you're around to spot them. Let them wrestle with worldly counter narratives to God's truth while they're still under your care. That may feel risky, but the alternative, keeping them sheltered, then letting them be exposed to everything all at once when they leave home for work or college, is risky too. I like that passage because when she says worldly counter narratives to God's truth, I'm pretty sure she's talking about like teaching them evolution and like what they're going to be exposed to everything all at once. What does that mean? That means people like me, people like you, they might meet people who don't believe in their form of mythology. Oh my God, what a risk. Listen, if you're 18 and you meet someone who doesn't share your faith and they're convincing because they're normal people and not boogeymen, and your faith kind of crumbles under that, maybe it's not because you have a weak faith. Maybe it's because your faith is just a weak thing to believe in, period, right? Like, whatever. I don't know. If I'm your risk, if I'm the person you're worried about, I think your fears are overstated. If your kids need theological armor to protect themselves from reality or the obvious questions about your beliefs that people might ask about them, maybe it's your religion that's the problem a little bit. I don't know. Students, in my experience anyway, they are much more tolerant today of people's differences, including religious differences. And the only time that ever becomes an issue is if someone is trying to force their religion on someone else. Like being annoying is a far bigger liability in middle school than being Christian. I don't care where you live. Like, I'll speak for myself. My kids are not being raised in any one particular religion. And I have spent a grand total of 0 nights thinking about, oh my God, what's going to happen if their friends are religious? Oh no, never happened. Why? Because I'm not trying to indoctrinate my kids into my worldviews. I hope they learn values from me. I don't need them to believe everything else the same way. But look, let's accept this premise, the idea that Christians should not be afraid to break out of their bubbles. Like, you know what? That's a good idea. I respect that. It's good for the kids. It is important for the other kids in their classes who may not be exposed to Christians like them. So I do appreciate that a Christian writer is urging other Christians to at least consider sending their kids to public schools, right? You know, the water is warm. You can come in, you can dip your toes into the shallow end. I would add that if the only reason you're sending your kids to public school is to inoculate them against, oh no, Muslims and atheists or something, maybe your priorities are out of order because there are actually really good reasons to send your kids to public schools, like getting an education and learning math and reading books, uh, books plural. But anyway, none of those reasons get any column space here because I don't know, what's the use of telling people, readers of Christianity Today, to consider public schools if you're also not debunking all the myths along the way that they're hearing in their churches? So the piece doesn't have a lot of substance, but you get the point. Like, you know what? I think I'm glad she wrote that. You know what I mean? And yet, right wing Christians lost their damn minds over this piece that was basically a nothing burger. All right. I'm going to show you some tweets some people made in response to this article, and they are all over the place crazy. Consider some of these. Look at this one. Sending your child to public school is like sending an untrained soldier into battle. You need to realize your kids are not a missionary to public schools, they're the mission field. Jesus, this guy, whoever this is, they think your kids are going to school and everyone else is out to get them. Like, dude, no one's thinking about your kid other than that kid's teacher. And that kid's teacher is thinking about books and numbers and want to train them in paganism for 1,260 hours every year for a minimum of 13 years. Listen, as an atheist who taught in a public school for many years, I don't know where I would have found time in the curriculum to teach them about paganism. I was really busy with like finding slope of a line. Sorry, didn't get into the hating God section of the textbook. The people who hate public schools are the ones who know the least about how public schools work. This is one by a known right-wing misinformation dude. Sounds like pedo stuff. One rule I know to be true: never trust an adult telling you to send your kids into the den of lions. Right. Listen, your kids are far safer at a public school than they would be in front of a youth pastor. All right. Calm down. Here's another one. 6-year-olds are not ready for spiritual combat. Train them someplace safe, then deploy them into the war when they're old enough to understand it and strong enough to fight. These people think everything is a battle. My God, they're like, how do you live like this? Sending them to public school largely removes them from your care and puts them in the care of God haters. You bloody idiots. Millstones for you all. And if you're not familiar with that reference, millstones is basically a Christian death threat because it's a verse in the Bible. Handing your children over to government indoctrination and grooming is strength training the way leaving 5-year-old underneath a loaded barbell is strength training. Again, I'm telling you, as a parent, as a former teacher, I don't know, learning social studies is not going to ruin your kid's faith. And if it does, your faith is really bad. How do you not stand up against, like, oh no, they read a book? This is a good one. We see you. We see what you've done, are doing, and will continue to do. You are either an unwitting pawn or an intentionally malign influence on Christianity, today. And so does the Lord. Repent. Like, oh my God, this guy thinks this woman who wrote an article saying, maybe consider public schools. Maybe they're not the worst. And he's doing a villain in Act 5 of a movie. But my favorite one, the best response of all. Here you go. This is what you want Christian parents to do with their kids. Take a look. Take a look at this glorious image. I'm telling you, the people who hate public schools seriously think this is what happens in public schools. I don't know where they're getting the rainbow flag from. I don't know where they're getting the Black Lives Matter shirt or the wolf head. Though kudos to the costuming, it's not bad. And what age group is this? What age group are we skipping whatever the lesson plan is and going straight to wolf, Black Lives Matter, someone break out a rainbow flag? What are they doing with the flag? I don't know. This is English class. What are they doing? I don't understand the right. I don't understand conservative Christians. But that is kind of hilarious because all of these people are insane. Oh, Jesus. Just a whole bunch of conspiracy driven lunatics who have no clue what happens in a classroom, but they all know it's evil. All the while, there are countless Christians who do send their kids to public schools, who teach at public schools, who run public schools, and none of them are concerned about any of this because they actually know the places. They work there. And there are parents who have sent their kids to these schools and they know it's not that big of a deal. Like, look, I don't give a damn about the spiritual development of any of these kids. especially the kids who are not old enough to think seriously about any of this stuff. But great public schools provide a great public education. They should. Hopefully they would. If these Christian parents care about their kids and they're sending their kids to a quality public school and they have that option where they live, it should at least be an option. It sure as hell should not be treated like some sort of inherent nightmare with a wolf coming after your kids. Okay, I'll pause there for a bit. What questions we got here? Thank you for that donation. Do you have a new book in the works? Curious minds want to know. Either way, keep doing you because you give me hope. Thank you. That's very sweet of you. Thank you. No, I'm not working on any books right now, mostly because the articles I write and the stuff I talk about here tends to take up most of my time. I also feel like on a personal level, and this is not a knock on other people who are writing books, because there are atheists doing a good job of that. I feel like I don't read as much long form books. If anyone's listened to the podcast, I've read like devouring all the Robert Caro stuff for the past several like year and a half or something. But like honestly, it's been a while since I've read a long book about atheism. And I feel like if I'm not reading them as much, it's not going to be fun for me to write one right now. So I'd rather focus on these like little bites of stories where I can really quickly respond to something as opposed to a book that could be outdated by the time the stuff I care about comes to print. Anyway. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you for that support. That's the only feel good story I've heard all day. No, I promise you, there are a couple others maybe coming soon. We'll see. When you start thinking freely, the revelations just snowball from there. No kidding, right? Like it's for that Christian couple who decided to send their kids to public school. Like that was the thing. They finally realized, oh, I've been lied to all my life. And that whole process of deconstructing it takes a while to figure out. I'm actually going to do an interview with someone very soon who has been through that process and ironically has written a book about that process that I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, it's once that first domino falls, everything else kind of goes really quickly. And it's really hard to realize none of the people who raised us were lying to us, not knowingly, but they were wrong about this. And you have to rethink all these things, all these parts of your life. It's hard. Public schools have plenty of problems and deserve a lot of criticism, but I would trust a public school to educate my hypothetical kids far more than myself. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I appreciate about public schools, one of many things, which is that there are educators who know their field a lot more than I ever could. And I know homeschooling, listen, I'm not even trashing homeschooling. There are ways to homeschool your kids where you can like outsource a certain subject to someone who does have expertise. And a lot of homeschooling parents have the networks to make that happen. But it doesn't happen everywhere. And a parent, especially one who comes from a fundamentalist family where you yourself may have not had a good formal education, it's kind of scary to think that person's in charge of your child's education when they didn't get much on their own. Like there's only so far you could take them. And once you get past, first, second grade, stuff starts specializing and you may not know it all. I don't know what it is in reference to, but teachers are supposed to encourage curiosity and critical thinking in their students. So I wonder how obnoxious she may have been in school interjecting her faith on school lessons. I don't even know who we're talking about anymore, but you're right. Like teachers are supposed to encourage curiosity and critical thinking. And these parents who are mad at a certain book that a kid's been assigned to read or a history lesson that doesn't comport with the white revisionist history that like David Barton likes to perpetuate. Those parents are very annoying. Haven't covered the recent. Have I covered the recent Greg Locke story? No, I haven't. The story, as far as I can tell, is that I think sometime last week someone like shot a weapon into his house, leaving bullet marks. Maybe one child was home, thankfully not injured. Locke and his family were out of the house. And listen, obviously horrible. I have a weird love-hate relationship. There's no love with Greg Locke, but I could reach out to him. I didn't reach out to him over this. I don't know what the full story is. I was kind of waiting to hear more from the police, more details about what happened and why it happened. And this is totally conspiratorial thinking, but part of me is like, do I believe that this story is the way it is? Because the only source we've heard from is Greg Locke. And he kind of has a habit of painting himself as a victim and saying people are out to get him, and someone graffitied his tent, and then they graffitied it again, and someone vandalized his property. Like, he's been saying those stories for a long time, and there's never any proof of it. And obviously someone used a weapon at his house. Like, there are bullet holes. So, like, I don't want to downplay that, but also I would like to wait to get a little more information before saying anything about it. But obviously, assuming it's all true, horrible situation. That's scary. I don't care if you hate Greg Locke. No one deserves that sort of treatment. He's also moving his church somewhere in another community, I think, to get out of some lawsuits because he's making a lot of noise. So, um, I don't know. I hope he goes somewhere quiet so that all the noise he's making is contained and not bothering everyone. I don't know what else there is to say. Y equals mx minus God. Yes, that is the new slope formula. I teach kids there are imaginary numbers, just like God. Yeah, it's a lot of that. I'm sure that's what they think teachers do.